The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Coming at you all the way live. Welcome to Melanated Politics. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Eric Clark.
And I'm your host, David Harper, your co-host, David Harper.
How's everything been going, David?
Man, everything's been good. I'm glad to be back. Blessed to be here. We got to get it in. It's a lot going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. As far as myself, all has been well, as always.
Good to know.
Claiming it. Look, let's go ahead and cut to the chase. Let's go ahead and peel the scab off, as we say on Melanated Politics. Later in the show, we're going to go ahead and double back to Capitol Hill, okay, and dive into the testimony of former special counsel Robert Mueller, okay, regarding the Trump investigation. We're also going to get Donald Trump's response. So also the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates will be holding their second debate next week, and we're going to preview that. Also, our third topic today we will tackle is political conspiracy theories in the black community. I'll say that again. Political conspiracy theories in the black community. But first, today in black history, to our audience. On July 28th, 1917, the first black major-scale protest march occurred in the United States. More than 8,000 marched down Fifth Avenue in New York to protest the East St. Louis massacre of July 2nd, 1917, and also to protest the lynchings in Waco, Texas, as well as Memphis, Tennessee. Around the same time. Let's take a look at history.
And inflammatory public speeches.
They wanted to drive the blacks out of East St. Louis. They wanted to make East St. Louis an all-white town.
The evening of Sunday, July 1st, a car drove through a Negro neighborhood firing shots as it drove by. Later, when another car approached, shots were fired from the crowd. Maybe some thought it was the same car, but it wasn't. Police officers were in this one, and 2 were killed. When word of what happened spread, white mobs set out to attack blacks. They beat, shot, lynched, even burned to death. Fires were set in black neighborhoods and people were shot as they tried to escape the flames. A family just up from Mississippi stepped right into the middle of it.
And just as we got to 10th Street, where we were standing, we could see different people running and hollering, colored people. And they were getting down in the weeds that they were hiding from, and the guy would run and shoot you. He didn't know what to shoot. You just see the smoke and hear the shot.
That was a scary time.
The daughter of former Mayor Melbourne Stevens was told to stay indoors, and she watched from her bedroom window.
You could hear cars racing by and people yelling and screaming. And I could see all the fires burning. Where they'd set fire, to the colored houses. I was petrified.
No one will ever know for sure how many people were killed in the East St. Louis race riot of 1917.
the first black major large-scale protest march in the United States of America. This also happened in Rosewood, Florida, as well as Black Wall Street and Oklahoma. We do honor those who lost their lives in East St. Louis at that time, also around the United States, as well as in Waco, Texas, and Memphis, Tennessee, in which on July 28th, 1917, that protest in New York City, that's what that was all about. So we honor, praise every single individual that lost their lives for just simply being a black human being in the United States of America.
And sadly enough, it still goes on today. We feel that pain there in that history. We see it on the video, but we feel it today with Eric Gardner. As we found out that the police officer is not going to get indicted. He's not going to go to jail for the chokehold, or as we feel with Trayvon Martin, with George Zimmerman still being out there, and also he committed some other crimes. So the past is the present. It's not the past, it's the future. The past is still the present. And I know a lot of people like to say that we've made strides as a nation, but there's a difference between making strides and everything being equal and good, because everything isn't equal and good. And we still feel what happened in East St. Louis.
Well, a lot of times we talk about why blacks are at the bottom as far as the wealth gap. There are many different reasons. Let's not exclude this, what you just saw, as one of those reasons. So that's a good video to show. Go ahead and call in at 323-293-3375. Give us your opinion on that video, on that particular topic, on that march on July 28th, 1917 in New York City on Fifth Avenue. Call in, let us know what you think. We appreciate that. So, moving on. Donald John Trump, snake in the grass. Always up to his same old tricks. I can't knock a man for being who he is, being himself. It's just a recognition and the understanding that whatever we need to do to go ahead and combat the tactics, let's go ahead and go all in. Now, David, listen. For the past 2 years, President Trump has been under investigation for colluding with the Russian government and for obstruction of justice. The man in charge of that investigation was former special counsel Robert Mueller, okay? Now, who testified during a congressional hearing Wednesday, July 24th.
Okay, so this is why actually the video that you just showed with what happened in East St. Louis transition to Donald Trump is very important, because Donald Trump, we already know that he is a racist. He's cut from a white supremacist cloth. He said white nationalism. He wants to make that regular. He wants to normalize racism on another level. And the reason why this Trump investigation with Russia is important, because it shows that he is above the law. The Mueller report and the Mueller testimony, what it proved is that, number one, he did commit basically obstruction of justice. That they couldn't go further because Donald Trump is the president, and and they couldn't go any further than where it is, other than exploratory investigation. But the question that was answered about if once he finishes office, once he gets out of office, if he can be indicted, it was 100% yes. He can be indicted for obstruction of justice. He can be indicted for, just like all the other people, Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, anybody that doesn't have president in front of their name, he can be indicted. And that was clear. And it was answered several times questions being thrown at Mueller when Republicans asked Mueller. Actually, Republican name was Ken Buck from Colorado, Republican congressman, said, could Donald Trump be indicted after he leaves office? And Mueller clearly, I know he's an older man, I know he's like in his 70s, 74, he said yes, clearly. You heard that yes. So basically right now we have not just a racist in office, but we have a criminal in office. And he is being protected by one party. And also, let's just be honest, Russia and how they view America and how they view black people and how they know how to expose in the division that we've always had. It's not new, but they brought it up to light through the proxy of Donald Trump. And the Republicans always knew that part of our country existed. Now they're riding a wave. That's why he's getting this protection. And so that's why it's very important for people to understand that this is not hypothetical when it comes to race and criminality.
Were you impressed with the testimony of former Bob Mueller? Were you impressed at all?
I wouldn't say I was impressed.
The special counsel.
See, I'm a practical person. You know what I mean? I like to look at facts. I like to look to see if the person's honest.
Can I tell you what I think?
I thought he was being honest.
Can I tell you what I think?
What do you think?
I think he was shaking like Ivanka Trump and the housing projects on a flat tire.
You talking about Donald Trump was shaking like
Ivanka.
Trump? Okay. That's a strong possibility.
That's how much he was shaking.
I believe that. I believe that because generally when he's shaking, that's when he goes to Twitter.
He was not straightforward. He was not forthcoming. He was not candid with respect to his answers. I mean, come on, Bob.
But Bob, you got to understand, Bob was there to do the work. He wasn't there to talk.
I didn't expect him to go housewives on them. But can we get a straight answer?
Where did he give you a straight answer? What kind of answer did you want?
I had planned on watching the entire testimony.
Mm-hmm. I guess let me ask you,
I may have done a U-turn after 3 or 4 hours.
Let me ask you a question. What was it about Mueller? Did it put you to sleep? That's a better
question.
No,
it did not put me to sleep because if you do not study those who study you, how can you go from not having a lot of power to having, if not all, but most of the power? You have to study these people like they have studied us. So yes, it was imperative that I watched that testimony of your boy Bob.
Yeah, but Bob he never. I think the illusion was people thought that he could convict. He had all the power to do, all type of prosecutorial. All the prosecutorial strength to go after Trump. And that was never the case. What he did, he put the case in front of Congress. It's Congress' job to now.
David, can we get an answer? Can the American people get an answer? He didn't answer any questions.
He answered questions. He said that he was guilty.
If you would have fell asleep and woke up without looking at the television, you would have thought you was watching the first 48.
Okay, the point is, in your opinion, how does this relate to black people? How does it relate to melanated people, the melanated people? How does all this relate to our community?
If the United States government is in charge of how old you have to be to drive, buy alcohol, vote, own property, obtain an occupation, a job, etc., it may just be wise for melanated people, for black folk, which represents 75%, 3/4 of people on planet Earth. You must study the fabric of the political spectrum in which the country that you live in. It's just that's 1 + 1 is 2.
Okay, so what Mueller basically saying Donald Trump committed a crime?
Well, just to further answer, we have to connect your boy Bob and that snake in the grass, Trump. We have to connect them together because after the intelligence agencies of the United States, through their investigation, through their research, the Russians impeded upon the U.S. elections.
Yes.
Donald Trump was picked to be a candidate over Hillary by Russia, and we'll just give us a second. We'll break that down like an improper fraction in just a moment. But there's many opinions and conspiracy theories about. I mean, first of all, Bob, your boy Bob.
Yes.
He's a Republican.
Yes, he's a Republican. But you got to understand that being a Republican, we had this conversation. Now, I'll try to be brief, audience. We had this conversation about Republican, Democrat. There's a difference between being a Republican and being a racist and co-signing racism. Bob Mueller does not co-sign racism and corruption. That's not
Okay.
that's not been his MO. And let's just say corruption. Let's just leave
Welcome back,
racism.
David Harper.
Let's just say corruption. I'm not just interrupting you there. Let's just say corruption.
No, it's not. You know, when you say it's a difference between being a Republican and being a racist, that's like saying
with some people. Let me clarify. With some people.
With some people. Okay, some people.
With some it goes hand in
I
hand.
stand with some,
Yes.
but just overall, I mean, a Republican and a racist is like a baked potato and French fries.
Which one's the baked potato and which one's the French fries? Because French fries, I think, it's worse for you, right? Because it's fried. Baked potato, it's in the oven. Okay, I'm
You can
going
put as much
sidebar.
ketchup on them as you want,
going
but
sidebar
tell me
like that.
they are different.
They're different. They're different. They taste different. They're cooked different. They're from the ground, but they're different. One's cut up, chopped up. One's not. One's whole.
Well, right now,
You didn't think I could do that, did you?
well, right now we have a call, so we'll go ahead and take that call. Welcome to Melanated Politics. Thank you so much for calling in. Tell us how you really feel.
Well, thank you for for having a conversation about politics and how it impacts our community. My comments though were about Robert Mueller, and Robert Mueller has served this country most of his life. He's in his 70s. He was a Marine. He served in various public capacities. And the fact that he's in his 70s rang through because he's in his 70s. I suspect that's why he wanted to have his chief of staff there to make sure that he, if he made some obvious stumbles, that someone would be there to correct him. But I think that him being a white Republican, it doesn't matter. Bob Mueller has shown how much that he loves his country more than his party because he served with, Democratic presidents. And, the politics didn't matter as much as people's actual patriotism did. So my question for the handsome host who mentioned who suspects that he may not trust Bob Mueller was, what was your expectation? Because I don't know. I feel like Bob Mueller was there to translate a book into a movie and not necessarily teach us something new, but to make the idiots who weren't paying attention to the Mueller report in writing pay attention to it if it's on their TV.
My brief,
Thank you so much, Carl. I love that question.
my brief, minimal expectation was to take the Attorney General William Barr to task. When Bob Mueller presented his report, Bill William Barr might as well took it in the restroom and took out a pack of crayons and basically changed everything. So I expected him, with respect to expectations, to mention something about the fact that Attorney General William Barr, as well as President Trump exonerated themselves based off the report of the former special counsel. So I expected those two things. I expected him to take those two people to task, mention their names, and although, according to the law and ongoing investigations, there's certain things that they cannot mention, but at the same time, they still can be more straightforward and more candid regarding their communication to the American people as he was on Capitol Hill and as it relates to Donald Trump.
Did you watch the second second part of his testimony, or just the morning testimony?
I watched both.
Okay. Did you notice a difference between the 8:30 in the morning testimony and the afternoon testimony?
Before I pass it to my co-host David Harper, let me say, yes, I did.
And I think that's because he's a 74-year-old man. And I think that because the questions nobody asked him a question about William Barr. And they should have, because William Barr needs to be run up on a rail without a doubt. And I think he will be when all this is over. But I think there was a clear distinction just in his acuity because he's older. But I think that second testimony, there was some fire in him from the questions. And I think that the questions, too, in the earlier part were a little, they were a little more suited to who he is as opposed to your expectations. But I'm sorry, that's just my view, just an old voter, that's all. But you guys are really good.
Thank you.
I'll be tuning in again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank
you
so
for
much.
Calling in.
I agree with the caller 1,000%. Bob, my friend Bob, my boy Bob, had to get warmed up. He had to get warmed up. That's all it was. I mean, the first half was like, he was getting, he had to put the Bengay on and had to let the coffee sink in a little bit. It was in the morning. You know how older folks get. They don't get really popping until later on. They're not as spry.
You make it sound like he's an old deuce and a quarter.
No,
an old Cadillac or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what he.
Out there in the morning and start
that's exactly what he is. He's an old. He a tall dude. He's an old Cadillac. He a tall. I think he's like 6'3.5", 6'4". He's a tall Cadillac. That's exactly what he is. So he's an old deuce and a quarter. He needs to get warmed up a little bit. But point. The thing is that another thing he wanted to do, I think one thing that was consciously on his mind was not to be on attack mode to ask more questions because, again, the report was laid out. He had to contradict the remix of the report, the horrible William Barr remix of it, with Trump in the background. He had to be like, no, this is the original. This is how it's supposed to be. Like, you don't remix.
That was like "You're All I Need," a Mary J. meth.
It was no. It was more. It's more Old Town Road. Willie, that's what it was. It was more Old Town Road remix. It wasn't no Mary J. Method Man. But it was. He wanted to keep the integrity of because on a lot of and I put another person I put on there is not
What do you think about that? He did a bad job acting, man.
What was the original FBI, the one that got fired?
Comey.
I wanted to say Comey. That was
former FBI director.
FBI director. Excuse me, audience. Former FBI director Comey is cut from the same cloth as Bob Mueller in the sense that they are country first. And they see the protection or the lack of protection for the country. And they wanted to try to keep everything down the line and not be partisan.
Okay, are they country first? Or they keep their power first?
They're country first.
Are they Republican first?
They're country first. If they were Republican first, they wouldn't go as hard. If they were, because the Republican Party now is different than the George Bush or even the Reagan or the Daddy Bush Republicans that ran the country. This is a totally different animal right now.
Well, let's go ahead and let's see what Donald Trump had to say.
Have the last word.
The Democrats lost so big today. Their party is in shambles right now.
The president says he won the day, once again dismissing the entire Russia investigation as a hoax.
A phony cloud, that's all it was. And they should be ashamed of themselves.
The president continues to say that Robert Mueller's report totally exonerates him on the question of obstruction of justice.
Robert Mueller specifically testified that he did not exonerate you. Why do you continue to say that he does?
He totally folded because he never had the right to exonerate.
For most of the day, there was no Marine Guard outside the West Wing because Mr. Trump stayed in the residence and watched the hearings on TV. He gave Robert Mueller's performance a scathing review.
If you listen to the internet, this was one of the worst performances in the history of our country.
The president had nothing at all on his schedule today, and he appears to have spent most of his time watching these hearings and tweeting about them. That despite saying earlier this week that he probably would not watch them. The president is now in West Virginia tonight for a fundraiser as he focuses on his reelection.
I had to write this down. I'm sorry.
Donald Trump is asking us to believe what our eyes are not seeing. But look, David, audience, according to the facts of the report, here's what we do know. The investigation did not exonerate Donald Trump. Russian interference was not a hoax or a witch hunt. And also, Donald Trump lied and directed others to lie regarding Trump Tower meetings with Russians. That's a fact. Okay. Also, finally, Donald Trump could be indicted after leaving office. That's the bottom line. Mr. Harper, where is the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, in all of this?
Okay, so Nancy Pelosi is trying to walk a delicate line, because the reality is that a good portion of the new Congress came from states, gerrymandered districts, where Democrats had to work extremely hard to win, that has a certain number of Trump supporters. And those numbers, those Trump supporters in particular, they're soft supporters, but supporters nonetheless. And there's a good number of them. So she's trying to do two things. One, show that she wants to be hard on Trump, but two, not alienate those block of voters that she needs to keep the House to the Democrats. That's why there's this struggle about impeaching or not to impeach. And that's mainly, I hate to put it this way, I'm not giving somebody props for saying this, but the Republicans knew back in 2009 when Barack Obama and the Democrats won big, really big, that off-year election in 2010, and I want our audience to do this research, after Barack Obama won in 2008, that historical landslide election, the Republicans knew they didn't have the numbers of people for the votes. That's why gerrymandering, if you don't know what gerrymandering is, it's basically cutting up your lines in your state, your districts, to favor one side or the other. And in this case, Republicans knew we don't have the numbers. We will never have the numbers of people voting for us. So we have to cut these lines in such a way that we can get a large volume of voters to vote for us. So I say all this to say that fast forwarding from 2010 to 2018, which was 8 years later, when Democrats won, a lot of Democrats, don't get me wrong, AOC, Presley, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, all of them are amazing. But the majority of Democrats, the new Democrats came in those gerrymandered districts. And Nancy Pelosi is trying to balance that. That's why because she knows that until the Democrats get the Senate and the presidency, they can't undo what the Republicans did. And those local state governments aren't going to do it on their own. It has to be federally done. So it's strategic. I know I'm going into.
She needs to pick a side, because right now she's like a dog chasing her own tail. She needs to pick a side. You have the so-called far left progressive Democrats that Fox News refers to them as socialist.
Yes.
And then you have the establishment Democrats or presidential candidates, what we'll speak about in a moment here. But it's like Nancy Pelosi, she's inconsistent. She cannot make up her mind. She needs to pick a side. She hasn't done that. You have one of my favorite congressmen ever, Congressman Al Green out of Texas, who initiated and led the impeachment cause for Donald John Trump. But let's go ahead and talk about let's go ahead and preview next week the Democratic debates. Now, before we preview on the next Democratic debates next week, let's go ahead and look at the highlights from the last debate.
Which was interesting.
And it's significant because who will be the last person standing?
That's always going to be a number one question. We know the top the top four: Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and then right under there is Cory Booker, Julian Castro, Mayor Pete.
They might as well take their children to the park. They don't have a chance.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be interesting.
They don't have a chance.
It's going to be interesting.
I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing.
Look, everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
Okay, so
first of all, that man was doing more dodging than Barry Sanders. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot to unpack there. Let's just this back and forth with Kamala and Biden goes to your last point with Nancy Pelosi, where the Democrats are and where they're trying to straddle the line. Because the third part to your point to far left progressives and moderates, there's a third lane that's bigger than both, and a third lane is race. That is the biggest lane of why a lot of people won't say this, including progressives, of why President Trump got elected. Because this country has changed. It's not changing, it's changed. And what Kamala brought up to Joe Biden had to do with the past and his mistakes and admitting, okay, I was wrong here. And for the Democrats to
he never said he was wrong.
That's the whole point. He never said he was wrong. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Even when he praised a segregationalist.
He never said he was wrong. But he is representative. He represents many white Americans in that ilk.
He's straddling the fence like a pigeon, man.
He represents many white Americans in that ilk that vote for Democrats and that voted for Hillary and that voted for Barack Obama. And we're talking about a scale now, just honestly, we're talking about a scale of how racist you are you really racist or do you tolerate some racism? And that's where Nancy Pelosi and this group of Democrats are having to fight. Now, Bernie Sanders, if you saw in that video, he was in the middle. He was quiet. He was like, please, can we pivot to health care for all, Medicare for all? Can we pivot? Because the majority of quote-unquote progressive Democrats prefer to talk about Medicare for all and free college tuition and in improving the criminal justice system. That's their lane. Where Kamala was coming from, and believe me, I have my issues with Kamala. But where she made a great point was the evil, because that's what it is. The evil in states' rights into wanting to treat black people different than white people. And that goes not just for education, that goes with criminal justice, that goes to access to capital, whether it's banking, that goes to housing. People don't understand your local government has more power in a lot of ways than the federal, but the federal needs to step in when the local government, as we talked about with gerrymandering.
Yes, sir.
needs to be eliminated. And again, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden are trying to balance a line because they need our votes. They need that melanated vote. They need black votes. They need brown votes. And if you lost, and just for a hot second, when Castro pulled up on Beto O'Rourke saying, dude, you're not really down for us because you're still supporting the criminality of brown people. If you're going to go hard. Eliminate the criminal element of somebody wanting a better life. We're not talking about the drug dealers. We're not talking about the cartel. We're not talking about killers. We're talking about mom, dads, people that want a better life. Don't criminalize them because they crossed the border. Don't criminalize them. Say, yeah, they did something wrong, but don't say they're criminals. All of this conversation right now that's smack dab on the Democrats' lap because they're the party that needs black and brown people to win, whereas Donald Trump is just going for what he knows, which got him in the first time.
Absolutely.
So when you see the silence with Nancy Pelosi, it's not silence because she doesn't want to move. It's silence to think about how can she move, because in the electoral college system, for those of you who don't know, the electoral college is basically what the founders put in to basically give power to a small group of people. I'm not going to go. Some people say it has something to do. Of course, it had 3/5 to do to the slavery and to placate to Southern segregation, not even segregation, but to slave owners. And that's a whole other conversation. But here we go.
But as far as the Democrats and all the front runners, I mean, let's go ahead. Joe Biden.
Yes.
Okay. Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Yes, who has some of the best policies, hands down. Hands down.
So let's see what happens. I mean, me specifically, if anyone could take down Donald John Trump, and as far as his VP and that entire ticket, I would go ahead and would have to say I believe Donald Trump will win. I've said that an abundance of times on Melanated Politics, but I would say the best chance they have is maybe perhaps Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren.
Let me say this. It's a 50-50 chance that, in my opinion, that Donald Trump will win because it's still an electoral system. It's not a popular vote system. And for those viewers who don't understand the popular vote and electoral vote, electoral college is the system. Popular vote is the population. Hillary won the popular vote last time. It didn't matter because we lost the electoral votes. Basically, that power going to a small group of states. And the states that black people in general, need to look out for in this election. There's a few, of course, Michigan and Pennsylvania, of course, but in the primary, the last off-year election in 2018, Michigan went hard for the Democrats. Pennsylvania went hard for the Democrats. We're talking about Wisconsin, Arizona, North Carolina. Some people throw in Texas. Ohio's harder because it's very hard R. Ohio's harder because they went. The only Democrat that won in Ohio with any significance is Sherrod Brown, and he's an Ohio son. People know him and trust him. When he leaves, it probably won't go to Democrats.
And also, with respect to Ohio, shout out to former Congresswoman and Senator Shirley Smith.
Yes. Basically, in Wisconsin, I'll try to make this in short. Wisconsin, you're basically leaning on the Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren voters. Milwaukee, and Madison, Wisconsin, both have people of color, but not for the large numbers. So Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren will be strong in Wisconsin. In Arizona, and I'll be real quick with this, Arizona's a different battle because they already battled their own personal Trump in Arpaio. He didn't win.
Absolutely. Quick question before we wrap this subject up.
Right.
Well, who will have, and I mentioned this before, but I'll go ahead and run it back to you. Who will have more influence on Democratic voters, the traditional Democratic establishment or the so-called left progressives of the Democratic Party?
You know what?
As far as legislation, as far as policy, as far as the direction that the Democrats are heading in 2020 and beyond, as far as a platform, the establishment or the progressive, who has the mic, who's calling the shots, who is the future, because Nancy Pelosi cannot seem to mediate even moderate that effectively? So answer that question, sir.
I can't give you an answer to that until we find out who's going to be the Democratic nominee and who wins the presidency. Because if Liz Warren is at the top of the ticket, it's definitely going to be more on the progressive side. If Joe Biden wins on the top of the ticket, or Kamala splits the difference, you know, she's a fake, I don't want to say fake progressive, but yeah, she's a fake progressive, but talks a good game, and she's more on the moderate side. But if Liz Warren is at the top of the ticket, I'm not going to put Bernie Sanders in there.
Let me tell you something. R. Kelly will get a Lifetime Achievement Award before Kamala Harris is the next president of the United States. Her record in California is atrocious.
You're absolutely right about that.
With respect to black men that had to stay in jail because of her policies. And all of a sudden, she's running for president, and Kamala Harris is black as 3 o'clock in the morning. If you don't knock it off.
Bottom line, I was going to make a point with that. If Joe Biden or Kamala, I'll just say Joe Biden. If Joe Biden's at the top of the ticket, it's going to be more the moderate side. If Liz Warren, the progressive side, will have more of a say, because ultimately it's who's going to win in these primary states, who's going to win the nomination, and no one can really say. No one can really say. No one can really say, because you got to get out and vote consistently, and the moderates vote more than progressives. Just to be honest with you,
from a political perspective, if most or all black folk in America would register to vote and actually voted, would that be enough to vote or force Donald Trump out of office? If most of the black qualified electorate went out there and voted?
Yes, because I can give you the 2 states right now that would go Democrat if they did that. And that's North Carolina and Georgia. And if, real quick, last point, if Latinos got a chance, if they did that, that means Arizona and Texas both would go Democrats. But that's another conversation. Go ahead.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of black folk don't vote in the United States.
Very true.
And it's for a various amount of reasons. That's why one of our topics just happens to be political conspiracy theories within the black community. Now,
this is the fun part. Go ahead.
Let's go ahead and have some fun. I've had the pleasure of speaking with so many of my brothers and sisters that say, I'll never vote, I won't vote, voting is not important, it's a waste of time, etc., etc., etc. I consider those to be political conspiracy theories within the black community. Now, let's just go over a few. These are things that I've actually personally have heard with my 2 very own ears, okay? Oprah Winfrey put Obama in the White House. Voting is rigged, David. The whole system is rigged. Audience, no black politician has done anything for black people. Obama only got elected, you know why? Because he was light-skinned. Even if I vote, them white folks gonna put in office who they want to put in office anyway. And also, finally, this is the one that I hear so much. Voting doesn't change nothing. I hear that a lot. So, David, on the other side of this, I would like you to respond, but with respect to history of the black vote and Reconstruction, because it's all relevant, I want us all to go ahead and take a look at Professor Henry Gates that gave a thought-provoking description of the black vote as well as Reconstruction.
One of the greatest achievements of Reconstruction was granting black men the right to vote. In 1867 alone, over 80% of all the black men in the former Confederate states registered to vote. 3 years later, Hiram Revels was elected the first black man to serve in the United States Senate, and Joseph Rainey became the first black United States congressman. Their election paved the way for more than 2,000 black office holders who served at every level of government during Reconstruction.
There are not many moments in recorded human history where a group that was so subordinated would, within the space of a decade, actually be integrated into the highest echelons of political society.
But the momentum wouldn't last. Black men's access to the ballot box, along with other key rights gained during Reconstruction, were rolled back systematically throughout the South.
In 1875, near the end of Reconstruction, the 44th Congress included 7 black House members and a United States Senator. By 1900, only one remained, Congressman George Henry White of North Carolina.
By the time George H. White leaves office in 1901, he literally turns the light off on national black political leadership. No one will come behind him for an entire generation.
One of the cruel ironies of Reconstruction is that black people could claim certain rights in the 1870s that they would have to fight to reclaim in the 1960s.
A sobering reminder that achievements thought permanent can be overturned and rights can never be taken for granted.
Call in right now if you think that voting is not important. Call in right now.
Please.
It's imperative. That was very thought-provoking. Now, this is the question to the audience. If voting is not important, according to the conspiracy theorist, or they just put someone in there because they like them or they want to just manipulate, or they want to make it seem like blacks have power. Man, the Ku Klux Klan wasn't playing that off in the 1800s, man. Get that out of the way. Okay? So either voting was important to black folk or everyone you saw on that video was stupid. Call in right now and tell us how you think about that, or leave something in the comment sections. But right now, we're going to go ahead and take another call. Thank you for calling in.
Good morning, Mr. Harper and Mr. Clark. This is Kevin. How's it going this morning?
Good morning, Kevin. Good to hear your voice, man.
Good to hear you. Good to see you, Dave.
Good to see you.
You guys have had a really informational show this morning, and it was nice to sit back and just try to listen in its entirety. And I'd like to just offer a few points regarding the things that you have covered. For starters, and I want to work my way to what you said about the black vote, because that is very important under the auspices of understanding that politics and political engagement is the one way to affect social change that's beneficial to black people. The only other option you have is violence and overtaking the government, which is not even feasible, so I won't even go into that fantasy. But I noticed, I watched a series called Emancipation Road, and it covered the time frames that Dr. Gates discussed. And it showed how the black political achievement during that time was at such a rapid pace that if you notice the Klan factions, it caused a resurgence of the Klan. It caused them to have national marches. And black people should understand, if anything that they're that reactive to, it obviously has to be beneficial for you. So if you even want to look at it from an intellectually lazy standpoint, look at that as a default position for everything you should understand or see as beneficial, is anything that they rallied that hard against. You know, just look at it like that, as yin and yang, positive and negative, or whatever you want to have it. But I'd like to talk some about the other topics. Mueller is very methodical. He doesn't get caught into the tabloid aspects, the emotional, rhetorical aspects of politics. He's like my President Obama. Obama was a very scholarly president, and people used to decry him about not calling himself the black people's president and not speaking out directly beneficial to black people. President Obama understood from a scholarly standpoint that he could take certain actions that will disproportionately benefit black people by default, such as health care. So he didn't have to walk around with a dashiki throwing black power his blackness. He was a scholar. And about Mueller. Mueller was methodical, and he set the framework for anything that needs to be done in terms of not exonerating Trump, which he did state directly but indirectly, and that will take care of itself. As so far as Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party is in a state of flux between the progressives and the establishment wings. And what Nancy is trying to do, Mr. Harper touched upon it, is she's trying to retain her House majorities because that is the only thing that would allow any form of brakes to be put on this presidency for its remainder. So what she's doing, she's straddling the line to try to tell each side that you're relevant, but not to move in a way where you paint the picture of the party as too obligated in one direction. And the reason being, we understand in the time of Trump that he uses language and rhetoric in a way that makes voters emotionally responsive. And the least little leaning toward progressiveness or to establishment would sway the electorate some in the Democrats relative to the Democrats, especially in the gerrymandered districts that Mr. Harper alluded to. The next thing I would like to mention, the difference between Kamala Harris, and I understand Mr. Harper's point about Kamala and Biden, but I think at this point, the political calculus for the Democratic Party has to be from Nancy down to the nominee. It's going to have to be like a hybrid automobile. It's going to have to be a combination of electric and gas, not all gas or all electric, in order to encapsulate every aspect of the Democratic electorate you need. As a prime example, if you look at Biden and you look at Kamala Harris is a black woman. Naturally, the black electorate would evolve toward her, not because she's black, because she's progressive. She's very definitive and methodical. And at the same time, you got to look at Biden, who was President Obama's VP. That has a lot to do with support he would get from the black community. But at the same time, Joe Biden is a white guy who might be best equipped to fight a white guy like Trump, because he could be the one dividing factor that could sway the Midwestern white guy who might now be an alienated Trump supporter.
Okay, we have to wrap it up in one moment. But before we go,
Okay.
Kevin, speaking of white guys fighting white guys, what is your take? Go there with the political conspiracy theories in the black community. Even if I vote, for example, even if I vote, then white folks gonna put in the office who they want in office anyway. My vote doesn't count. Voting is rigged. Everything you heard her say prior to your phone call. Speak on that, and I have to wrap it up after that.
Okay, well, and just for starters,
And as well as the video, as well as the video. Speak on that real fast. I have to wrap it up.
Okay, as well as the video, people should look at the power that was obtained really fast after the Emancipation era. They should understand that political engagement is a way to effect social change from the 60s from all the way back then. Conspiracy theories are creations of uninformed people. They should understand that. Do the research, understand the facts. Now, if black people were that empowered that soon after slavery because of politics and had representation, what do you think caused the black backlash? If black people wasn't accomplishing anything, there wouldn't have been no backlash.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, so for the fact that politics is the vehicle for effecting positive social change for black people, conspiracy and the whole approach to that needs to be thrown out the window, and just look at that as a flawed, low information approach, period.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
Thanks, Kevin. And the analogy you gave as a hybrid vehicle, that was awesome. That was great, man. That was great. Thanks for calling in. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, brothers. And you have a good day and continue to fight the good fight.
You too. Thanks a lot. I agree with Kevin 100%. The cynicism of the black conspiracy theorists is really 94 years in the making. Like you said in the video, 1870 to 1960, we were shut out. And that's a big jump. So to 1964, to 1964 Voting Rights, Civil Rights Act, and 1965 Voting Rights Act, and then you throw on top of the war on drugs that Nixon put in, that was to fight against us because Republicans had to placate. We were getting more power, so history is just repeating itself, and that's where gerrymandered districts and everything come into play. So this is the definition of America right now. But as history showed us, we have to fight back through democracy and voting. And really, if we want to, if you care about your kids' education and kids' future, if you care about your life, your mama's life, you gotta get involved.
Well, also, I want to just address a lot of conspiracy theorists, personally who I've spoken to, had some intellectual conversations, whatever. Prove it. Whatever comes out of your mouth, be able to prove it. And that's just the bottom line. In any endeavor, you have to be able to prove what you say, especially when you go to school. You don't turn in a report or have any type of subject matter that you have to turn in at your job, in school, whatever. You have, even if your mama tell you, even if your mother say go wash the dishes, if you have the type of mama, most of our black folk, she gonna double back and go see if the dishes are clean. Mom, I washed it. Prove it. Let me go see. Anyway,
that's true.
We have Melanated Politics Weekly, snake in the grass, and that is the governor of Tennessee, Bill Lee. Okay, Governor Bill Lee proclaimed July 13, 2019, Nathan Bedford Forrest Day. Now, Nathan Bedford Forrest was not only a slave trader, Nathan Bedford Forrest was the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Ku Klux Klan, seriously. Nathan Bedford Forrest, he honored this man for the whole entire state of Tennessee. So, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, you are a cold-blooded, fork-tongued snake in the grass. And that's a shout-out to you, so it is what it is.
More of those where they came from. Definitely.
It's a pit.
It's a pit.
It's a snake pit.
Yeah, straight up. Straight up.
Melanated Politics, David.
Melanated Politics. Good to be back.
Melanated.
We got to do this again.
Melanated is the essence of color. We define politics as war without bloodshed. So there you have it. The essence of color, war without bloodshed. Thank you so much to the individuals that we were lucky enough to have you call in. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to the crowd. Welcome back, David Harper. Shout out to our producer, Sheena. And also, shout out to every single human being that has been down with David and myself and Melanated Politics from day one.
Thank you.
For all you conspiracy theorists, you are always welcome to call in. Just remember this one thing. Look at me. Look at me. I'm the captain now. David Harper, PG County, Eric Clark, Compton, California, Melanated Politics, we're out.
Oh, yeah, we had to thank the poetess, too. We forgot the poetess.
OG Poetess.
OG Poetess, yes.
OG Poetess.
The incredible smile.